Welcome back to this wild studio of mine. This week we are going to look at tiger. We're going to do a portrait using watercolour and graphite, and it's the perfect opportunity to play with watercolour if that's a new to you medium and maybe something that seems a little bit scary. We're going to use water's ability to flow and graphite's precision to get a harmony between the two. Some loose washes, some detailed marks, some control and some surrender. And knowing that tiger is one of the few big cats that actually likes water, I think that's really appropriate. All right, let's go. Hello. Right, I've already managed to get paint all over my hands. So we're going to play with some watercolour today, hence the paint all over my hands already. But we're going to work on a tiger, and I really don't know what it is that I'm going to do yet. So it's going to be a bit of a play and see. And to be honest, play is such an important aspect of what we do when we create art. It's actually kind of hard to reconcile that when you're trying to feel and be serious about your art. But I think it's really, really important. To try and remember that, and it's something that I'm very happy to remind you of, because I need to be reminded myself as well too. Not everything has to be serious and for betterment, specifically with an aim, but everything that we do is going to increase our skills, to build our skills and to make us a more connected, compassionate, courageous artist. So play is a big part of that. And today I'm going to play with tiger. So I have a reference, I'll pop it up on the screen here now, and you'll have a link to that down in the description. All right, so first of all, I want to sketch lightly out my tiger, and I'm always going to be looking for the big shapes. And this guy is going to be poking around the side of my book a little bit. When I sketch out, I am keeping loose. My hand is way back on my pencil. I am really not looking at any details at all. I'm looking at the biggest shapes that I can find and trying to find those on the page by moving my pencil around and keeping my eye mostly on the reference, and just playing, trying to remind my brain that I want to draw what I see, not what my brain wants me to draw, which is going to have big implications when you're doing things like perspective of where eyes are, etc. Your brain is going to want to put eyes up here because that's more human-like, sort of. But you want to look at exactly where things are on your reference. Get anchor points, really. Find somewhere where you feel fairly certain what you've done is correct, and then measure things off from that. So I can see straight away eyes are way too close together here. So I'm going to keep moving. I'm going to keep moving and finding those edges. You can do this with circular forms, like you can see that I do in some spots, or you can do it with lines that you look at angles of. I tend to do a combination of all of these things. And I don't worry about erasing. So something's going on here. If I come down from the edge of the ear, it comes into about a third of the way in on the eye. Okay, I'm going to leave that there for now. Such a really simple, basic shape. Now, I want to do two things with this as far as watercolour goes. I want to create a loose-ish wash around the edge, and I want that to be a complementary colour to the oranges we see here. So on a colour wheel, which I'll pop a little colour wheel right here now, you're going to see that bluey purple is opposite to orange. I actually want to grey that out a little bit too, I think. So I'm going to create a colour and we'll see what happens. Here I have the Daniel Smith Ultimate Mixing Palette. It's the one that I tend to use for teaching particularly, because you can make every colour that you could possibly want to from what's in here. This is Prussian Blue. She got a little stuck on the Prussian Blue and came off. But I think that it's a really lovely mixing palette. So I'm going to take a little bit of cerulean. What do I want to do? Let me think. What do I want to do? I think I might take just a tiny bit of the Quin Gold, which is its opposite. Mix it like a greeny sort of colour. There's a lot of yellow in the Quin Gold with that blue. Let's push the colour back a little bit, and then I think I'll add just a tiny bit of burnt umber to make it more grey. What do I think? We can test these colours. You don't have to go straight in with this. So what does that look like? Yeah, I think that's quite nice actually. I was going to go more purple, but I think that the green against the orange could be quite nice. All right, well, what's an alternative? What's an alternative? Let's do cerulean again. And this time a little bit of burnt sienna, which I know makes a beautiful grey together. So less green, more blue. I'm popping in here now with a bit of narration because this is my reminder to you that things just take time to do, that realism particularly takes quite a long time. This full tutorial is available inside Hedgerow and it goes for just over an hour and a half. And I'm trying to condense it down into a 20-minute video here for YouTube. Now, of course, there's a lot of me waffling on, as usual, but things just take time to do. And so I'm going to talk you through a little bit about what I'm doing here, but basically we're going to be continuing to work in the layers of watercolour and then graphite, perhaps add a bit more watercolour, a bit more graphite, and backwards and forwards until we reach a place that feels like there is enough of both. There is enough of the flow of the watercolour, enough of the detail of the graphite. What that involves for the tiger is to utilise those orangey yellow colours such as quinacridone gold and cadmium yellow, and then add in a little bit of the burnt sienna, maybe even a little bit of Indian red, and build up some very light layers. You can see that I have that initial wash in there now. I'm only putting colour on about half of the tiger's face. I'm choosing to do that as part of the narrative of the piece. So I want it to be primarily graphite, but for there to be a little splash of colour. And you'll see as I move forward that I end up adding quite a bit more colour. Over the nose particularly, where it's very vibrant and very saturated in colour on the animal herself. But then I add a little bit on the nose and a little bit for the mouth as well. So when it comes to playing, that's part of the fun of it, is to allow things to develop as you go. What I had in mind initially may not be what I end up with, and you need to be okay with that. I think that's a huge part of playing, and it's a really exciting part of playing. So at the moment you're seeing that I am adding a lot more graphite, and that's going to happen over a couple of iterations. I'm going to build up using the darker colours and then the darker graphite, and then come in with another lot of the colour. And darken it a little bit more, and then come back again with the graphite, backwards and forwards. We've jumped a bit here so that you can see me working on these sort of interim layers, the middle layers. There's often quite a lot of messy middle when you're working realistically. And it's difficult at the beginning of your journey to reconcile that, to be okay with it enough, to have the courage enough to keep going. But that's what you've got to do. You've just got to keep going. You will get to a point eventually where things start to come together. Even if you don't think it's going to happen, it will happen. For her eyes in this instance, I made up a little bit of a blue with some phthalo blue and cerulean and added a little ring of that, and then used the cadmium, the brighter yellow, to sort of turn that into a greeny, lighter colour in her iris. And as this moves along, you're going to see that I add quite a lot more graphite to the eyes in order to make that highlight really pop. In order to make a highlight really pop, we have to have enough shadow around it. We have to have enough darks. And often when something doesn't feel very realistic, it's because there's not enough shift in value, a shift between the darks and the lights. It's really going to be those darks that make that. And you're going to see that happen over the next couple of cuts through. So basically, we have to have patience. We have to enjoy process more than worrying about outcome. We have to play, we have to experiment, we have to see what happens. A lot of what I do, I am asking myself, I wonder what would happen if. What if I did this? How could this work? And that's that curiosity that comes perhaps not so easily to start off with when we have more expectation, perhaps grasping a little bit tighter to perfection. But over time, you will realize that there is so much abundance and freedom in allowing yourself to experiment and being okay if something doesn't turn out the way you expect it to. Not everything will turn out. It just won't. It's just the law of averages. And we have to be okay with that. I always think, what is the worst possible thing that's going to happen if something you've spent 2 or 3 or 4 or more hours on doesn't turn out the way you want it to? And the worst thing that's happened is that you've spent time creating. I mean, that's a pretty good, bad outcome, right? So try and keep that perspective. Try and keep that beginner's mind and desire to learn, and try and keep some of that childlike play and wonder attached to your work, rather than tying up your worth or your sense of self around the finished product. That's always going to lead to you not wanting to do more. And we want you to do more. We want you to do a lot more. So here I've come back in with graphite again, and I am adding in some details. So of course, some of the hair in the ear is very light. And if we were doing this as a really realistic drawing, we would make sure that we were either using some sort of indenting tool or doing some negative drawing to get those light hairs in. But this is play. This is a sketchbook. This is where I'm safe to have a go and just make something that feels good. It's okay to feel good when you're creating art, right? And so I'm using some graphite just to make some sort of hairy textures. I'm using a bit of a paper stump to soften where I want to. And I'm just going to keep playing. I'm going to keep adding layers of either graphite or watercolour backwards and forwards until I start to get the sort of detail, the shifts in value, and the fun out of this piece that I want to. As I said, there's a lot of messy middle and you've got to be okay with that. But I think that you can see that even now, as I'm adding more darks, the image is coming off the page a little bit more. I think when you're using graphite in this way, in conjunction with watercolour, the main thing is that you want to remember to move the pencil in the direction of the fur. And that requires you studying your image. And the more that you look at your image, the more that you look at your reference, the more you're going to see. And then the more you see, the more you see. It's kind of a wonderful little Mobius strip of understanding and observation. And it means that you may need to make adjustments along the way, and that's okay too. That's also part of the fun of learning to sketch from scratch, to allow movement in how you understand form. So it's always shifting, right? It's always repositioning. What you see initially, often our brains are very good at wanting us to do something in a stamp-like way that was part of how we learned in school. Like, this is how you draw a house and this is how you draw a tree. And our brains are very happy with something like that because it means they can move on to something more or something different. We can let some sort of subject, topic, whatever go and move on. When you try to make art realistically, that's when you really need to slow down. You need to allow your brain time to accept that you want to draw what you see, not what you think you see, that you actually want to study. You want to be very observant. You want to grow those observation skills. The more you do that, the easier it will become to do that. And your brain will start to recognize that part of the gift of you doing this, part of the joy that you get from being present with your journey, with your creativity, means that you need to be able to observe. So you're training your hand-eye brain coordination. Your brain starts to realize what's necessary. But it takes time, like everything, it takes time. So I encourage you always to have beginner's mind, to think like an apprentice, that you're always learning, and I will be forever learning. And enjoy the process, enjoy playing, enjoy the act of building up layers, and enjoy the act of reciprocity that comes from being creative. Okay, there we go. So some graphite, a little bit of watercolour, and a few strokes of jelly roll pen. Well, this is a Sigma pen, but same at the end. And we've got a tiger in watercolour who's kind of sneaking his way out into the colour. And I had a lot of fun doing that. A lot of fun playing. It's fun to play. It is fun to play, and allow yourself that. Allow yourself that time to ask what if, and just find out what if. What if I do this? What if I add this here? What if? Because sometimes we really discover something that we find meaningful and want to include in other paintings, drawings, whatever, moving forward. And sometimes it's just what we need. We just need to do something that has not a lot of outcome attached to it, and that we can just play and come away with having some time playing without any attachment. So neither are right nor wrong, they're both important, and I think we need to make sure that we prioritise doing both too. Alright, I think I've probably played enough here. Look, I can keep going though. But there he is. Alright, bit of fun. Okay, my loves, see you next week. I hope you really enjoyed that. Remember to keep sketching. Oops. Remember to keep sketching, stay curious and compassionate, and let your creativity connect you to what is wild and wondrous in this world. And there is so much wild and wondrous. All right. Enjoy. I'll see you next time.